Welcome to Dreamy Nights. Unwind and drift away with soothing night stories crafted to calm your mind and lead you into a peaceful sleep. Each story here is a gentle escape where dreams come alive and your worries melt away like stars in the night sky. Relax, close your eyes, and let us guide you into a world of tranquility. The snow began to fall in the late afternoon, blanketing the tiny mountain village of whispering pines in a shimmering white coat. The sky, a muted gray, stretched over the pine trees that seemed to whisper their secrets to the wind. Inside the snug little cottage nestled at the edge of the forest, Nora stirred the embers in the hearth, coaxing the flames to life as the soft sound of the snow filled the quiet. It was the kind of winter evening that seemed to call for nothing more than thick woolen socks, a good book, and a steaming mug of cocoa. The smell of cinnamon and nutmeg wafted through the air as the kettle began to hum. Nora smiled to herself, pulling her heavy knit shawl tighter around her shoulders. This cottage had been her grandmother's, a sanctuary for as long as Nora could remember. When life in the bustling city became too loud and too hurried, Nora would retreat to the little house in whispering pines, where time seemed to slow and the world softened around the edges. Outside, the forest was alive with quiet sounds. The wind danced through the trees, making their snow-laden branches sway like sleepy giants. Somewhere, deep in the woods, a family of deer tread lightly, their hooves crunching softly against the snow. Nora's cat, Pippin, leaped gracefully onto the windowsill, his green eyes wide as he watched the snowflakes swirl. "What do you see?" Nora asked, pouring hot cocoa into her favorite mug, a chipped ceramic one painted with winter scenes. Pippin flicked his tail, his gaze fixed on the shadowy forest beyond the clearing. As the evening deepened, the world outside turned to silver and blue, lit by the glow of the full moon rising above the treetops. Nora settled into her favorite armchair by the fire, the thick quilt she'd inherited from her grandmother draped over her lap. She opened a book of old winter tales, its pages worn and smelling faintly of cedar. Once upon a time, she read aloud to Pippin, who purred in contentment. There was a forest where every tree held a secret. The fire crackled as she read, and the warmth of the room wrapped around her like a hug. But soon, the words began to blur on the page. Her eyelids grew heavy, and before she knew it, the book had slipped from her hands. Nora woke with a start to the sound of a soft knock at the door. For a moment, she thought she must have imagined it. Who would be visiting at this hour? And in this weather? The snow was still falling, its steady whisper nearly drowning out the world. But there it was again, a gentle knock, almost apologetic. She wrapped a quilt around her shoulders and padded to the door, the wooden floor cool beneath her feet. When she opened it, she was greeted by a figure cloaked in a dark green coat, a hood pulled up to shield against the snow. The figure lowered the hood, revealing a kind, weathered face framed by silver hair. "Good evening," the stranger said, his voice low and warm. "I hope I'm not intruding, but I seem to have lost my way in the storm." Nora blinked. "Of course, come in out of the cold. You must be frozen." The man stepped inside, brushing snow from his coat. His boots left wet patches on the rug, but Nora didn't mind. She motioned for him to sit by the fire, where Pippin regarded him with curious eyes. "I was following the old path through the woods, he explained as he warmed his hands by the fire. But it's been years since I walked it, and the snow has covered all the markers. The old path, Nora echoed. Her grandmother had spoken of it often. A trail winding deep into the forest, said to lead to a clearing where the stars seemed to touch the earth. Not many people know about it these days. The man smiled, a faraway look in his eyes. I used to know this forest well. It's good to see it hasn't changed too much. Nora brought him a mug of cocoa and sat across from him. Are you traveling far? Not far, he said, though his tone suggested a journey of a different kind. Just visiting an old friend. They spoke for a while, the firelight dancing between them. The man had a gentle way about him, and Nora found herself sharing stories she hadn't told in years, of her grandmother's tales, the winters spent in the cottage, and the dreams she'd forgotten in the rush of city life. As the hours passed, the snowstorm outside began to ease. The man rose, pulling his coat around him once more. Thank you for your kindness, he said, his eyes twinkling like the stars just beginning to peek through the clouds. It's rare to find such warmth on a cold night. Wait, Nora said, feeling a sudden pang of regret. Where will you go? He smiled. The forest will guide me. It always does. And with that, he stepped out into the night, disappearing into the silver shadows of the trees. The next morning, Nora awoke to a dazzling world of white. The storm had passed, leaving the forest cloaked in a thick blanket of snow. The air was crisp and smelled of pine and frost. She stepped outside, the snow crunching beneath her boots, and noticed something strange. There, at the edge of the clearing, was a narrow trail winding into the forest. The snow on the path was untouched, as if someone had swept it clear. Intrigued, Nora followed it, her breath clouding in the cold air. The trail led her deeper into the woods than she'd ever gone before, the trees towering around her like silent sentinels. At last, she emerged into a clearing bathed in golden morning light. The snow sparkled like 1,000 tiny diamonds, and in the center of the clearing stood a single, ancient pine tree. Beneath its branches lay a small wooden box. Nora knelt to open it, her hands trembling. Inside was a delicate silver pendant shaped like a star, and a note written in elegant script. Thank you for the warmth of your fire and the kindness of your heart. May this star guide you as it has guided me. She looked around, but the clearing was empty. The only sound was the whisper of the wind through the trees. Clutching the pendant, she felt a deep sense of peace and wonder. The forest, it seemed, still held its secrets. Back at the cottage, Pippin greeted her with a meow, and the fire crackled warmly in the hearth. Nora hung the pendant above the mantel, where it caught the light like a tiny sun. She knew she would never forget the strange, magical night when the forest sent a traveler to her door, and the quiet gifts it left behind. As the snow fell again that evening, Nora sat by the fire with Pippin in her lap, her heart full of the mysteries of winter. And in the stillness of the forest, the ancient pine tree stood watch, its branches whispering secrets to the stars. The following days brought a serene rhythm to Nora's life, but the events of that magical evening lingered in her mind. Each time she glanced at the pendant hanging above the mantel, a strange warmth settled in her chest. It felt like a gentle reminder that there was something more to this quiet world, a connection she had barely begun to understand. The snow continued to fall steadily, wrapping the forest in a deeper silence. Nora, ever curious, began taking longer walks through the woods, following the faint trails that seemed to shift and change with the landscape. Sometimes she thought she heard faint music carried on the wind, a soft, lilting tune that made her pause and close her eyes. The melody was fleeting, like a memory she couldn't quite grasp, but it filled her heart with a quiet joy. One morning, as the snow glittered under the pale sunlight, a knock came at Nora's door. It was sharper than the gentle knock from the previous visitor, and when she opened it, she was met by a young woman bundled in a deep blue cloak. Her cheeks were flushed from the cold, and her bright eyes sparkled with curiosity. "Good day," the woman said, her voice carrying a lilting accent that seemed foreign yet familiar. "I heard about a kind soul living at the edge of the forest. Might I trouble you for a moment of your time?" Nora welcomed her in, offering tea and a seat by the fire. The woman introduced herself as Amara, a traveler who had been wandering the region in search of. Well, she wasn't quite sure. "There's a sense of something here," Amara said, gazing out the window as the snow fell. "Something old and alive, like the forest itself has a story to tell. Have you felt it?" Nora hesitated, then nodded. "I think I have. There's a clearing not far from here with an ancient pine. It feels different, special somehow." Amara's eyes lit up. "You've seen it? That's why I came to this village." The whispers said there was a tree older than memory, tied to the stars. Nora frowned slightly. Whispers. Amara smiled, a touch mischievously. "The world is full of them, if you know how to listen. The rustle of leaves, the murmur of streams, and sometimes the stories carried by strangers on the road." There was a moment of silence as Nora considered her words. She had spent years in the city, where life moved too fast for whispers to catch her ear. But here, in the stillness of the forest, she had begun to notice things she'd once overlooked: the soft sigh of the wind, the gentle hum of the earth beneath her feet. "I think the clearing might be what you're looking for," Nora said at last. "I can take you there." The two women set out the next morning, bundled against the cold. The trail to the clearing seemed clearer now, as though the forest had remembered Nora's footsteps from before. The air was crisp, and the sunlight broke through the trees in golden beams, illuminating the path ahead. As they walked, Amara spoke of her travels, of far-off lands and ancient forests, of forgotten ruins and hidden treasures. But it was the forest of whispering pines that had drawn her the most. "There's a magic here," she said, her breath visible in the cold air. "Not the kind you see in books with wands and spells, but something older, wiser. A magic of the earth and the stars." When they reached the clearing, the ancient pine stood as it had before, its massive branches reaching toward the sky. Amara approached it with reverence, her hand resting lightly on the rough bark. She closed her eyes, as if listening. "What do you hear?" Nora asked softly. Amara smiled. "Stories. This tree has seen centuries of winters and summers, of lives lived and lost. It remembers everything." As they stood there, the wind picked up, and a cascade of snow fell from the branches, sparkling in the sunlight. Beneath the tree, the snow shifted, revealing another wooden box. Amara knelt and opened it carefully, her eyes widening as she pulled out a small bundle wrapped in cloth. Inside was a piece of polished wood carved into the shape of a compass. Its surface was etched with intricate designs, stars, trees, and flowing lines like rivers. Amara held it up to the light, her expression one of awe. "This is it," she whispered. "The compass of the whispering forest. It's said to lead its bearer to the heart of the world." Nora felt a shiver run down her spine, not from the cold, but from the weight of Amara's words. The heart of the world. Amara nodded. The place where all stories begin and end, where the threads of time and space converge. It's not a destination you can find on a map, it's a journey. And this compass will guide the way. As they made their way back to the cottage, the sky began to darken, and the first stars appeared. Amara turned to Nora as they reached the door. "Thank you for your kindness," she said, echoing the words of the silver-haired man. "I wouldn't have found this without you." Nora hesitated. "Will you go now?" "To wherever the compass leads." Amara looked thoughtful. "Not yet. The journey requires preparation and perhaps a companion." Nora blinked in surprise. "Me," Amara said with a smile. "You feel the forest's magic too. You've already begun listening to its whispers. And besides, it's a journey best not made alone." The idea both thrilled and frightened Nora. She had always loved the forest, but had never thought of herself as an adventurer. Yet the thought of following the compass, of uncovering the mysteries of the world, filled her with a quiet excitement. "I'll think about it," she said at last. Amara nodded, her gaze warm. "Take your time. The compass will wait." That night, as Nora sat by the fire, she held the silver star pendant in her hand. It glinted in the firelight, as if urging her to take the first step into the unknown. Outside, the snow fell softly, and the forest seemed to hum with possibilities. Pippin leaped onto her lap, purring contentedly. Nora stroked his fur, her thoughts racing. The forest had already changed her life in subtle, profound ways. Perhaps it was time to listen to its call more fully. As she drifted to sleep, her dreams were filled with starlit paths and ancient trees, with whispers that spoke of journeys yet to come. And in the heart of the forest, the ancient pine stood watch, its branches swaying gently in the winter wind. Days turned to weeks, and the forest remained cloaked in its wintry hush. Nora couldn't stop thinking about Amara's invitation. The compass had stayed with her, sitting on a small table by the fire where its polished surface caught the flicker of flames. Each time she glanced at it, a strange longing stirred in her, a pull toward something she couldn't name but felt deeply. Amara had stayed in the village, renting a room at the inn. She visited often, sharing more tales of her travels and describing the wonders she believed the compass could reveal. The two women grew close, their shared curiosity about the world drawing them together. One evening, as snow fell softly outside the window, Amara arrived with a pack slung over her shoulder. She set it down by the fire and pulled out a carefully folded map. "I've been doing some research," she said, spreading the map across the table. This region is full of ancient sites, places of power. The compass could be leading us to one of them. Nora leaned over the map, tracing the faint lines marking old trails and forgotten landmarks. Her finger paused on a symbol etched into the edge of the forest, a star encircled by a ring of trees. This, Amara said, tapping the symbol, is called the Circle of Evernight. Legends say it's where the veil between worlds is thinnest. I think the compass might take us there. Nora hesitated. The stories her grandmother used to tell spoke of the Circle of Evernight as both beautiful and perilous a place where one could glimpse truths hidden from ordinary eyes, but at a cost. Do you really think it's safe? She asked. Amara's eyes sparkled. Nothing worth finding ever is. Nora laughed softly, shaking her head. You make it sound so simple. Not simple, Amara admitted, but worthwhile. Come with me, Nora. This forest already knows you. It's been guiding you. Together, we can find what waits beyond the trees. The decision wasn't easy, but Nora couldn't ignore the pull of the compass or the growing sense that her quiet life in the cottage was only part of the story. She spent the next few days preparing for the journey, packing warm clothes, food, and supplies. Amara taught her how to navigate with the compass, though it seemed to have a mind of its own, its needle shifting in directions that didn't match any ordinary map. Pippin watched the preparations with mild disapproval, curling up on Nora's pack as if to stake his claim. I'll be back soon, Pip, Nora said, scratching behind his ears. Take care of the cottage while I'm gone. When the day came to leave, the sun rose pale and cold over the snow-draped forest. Amara met Nora at the edge of the clearing, her pack slung over one shoulder and her cloak billowing in the wind. The compass hung around her neck, its silver needle gleaming faintly. Ready? Amara asked. Nora nodded, her heart pounding. Ready. The forest was quieter than ever, the snow muffling their footsteps as they followed the compass's lead. It didn't point north or south, but instead seemed to guide them along paths invisible to the naked eye. Sometimes the needle would waver, and Amara would pause, listening to the forest, as if waiting for it to speak. The journey was both peaceful and strange. The deeper they ventured, the more the forest seemed alive in ways Nora had never noticed before. Birds flitted between branches, their feathers glinting like tiny jewels. A fox watched them from a distance, its eyes curious and intelligent. Once, they came upon a frozen stream where the ice seemed to hum faintly, as if a song were trapped beneath its surface. At night, they made camp beneath the stars, the fire casting long shadows across the snow. Amara told stories of other enchanted places she had visited, an island where the trees glowed with golden light, a desert where the sands sang in the wind. In this forest, Nora asked, what do you think makes it special? Amara smiled, her gaze thoughtful. I think it's a guardian. It holds secrets too precious for the world to lose, and it's been waiting for someone to listen. On the third day, they reached the Circle of Evernight. The clearing was vast and perfectly round, the snow untouched, except for a thin line of frost marking a ring of ancient trees. The air felt different here, denser, charged with a quiet energy that made Nora's skin tingle. In the center of the circle stood a single pedestal carved from stone, its surface etched with runes. The compass needle pointed directly to it, quivering slightly, as if eager to fulfill its purpose. Amara stepped forward, placing the compass on the pedestal. The moment it touched the stone, the runes began to glow, and a soft hum filled the air. Light spilled from the compass, forming a shimmering portal that flickered like the surface of a lake in moonlight. "What is it?" Nora whispered. Amara's voice was full of wonder. "A doorway." The portal pulsed gently, inviting them to step through. Amara turned to Nora, her expression alight with anticipation. "Shall we?" Nora hesitated only a moment before nodding. Hand in hand, they stepped into the light. The world shifted around them, and suddenly they were standing in a place that felt both endless and intimate. The sky above was a swirling tapestry of stars, galaxies spinning slowly in an infinite dance. The ground beneath their feet was soft and luminous, as though they were walking on light itself. In the distance, a massive tree rose from the horizon, its branches stretching out to touch the stars. Nora felt an overwhelming sense of awe. It was the same feeling she'd had in the clearing with the ancient pine, magnified 1,000-fold. "This is the heart of the world," Amara said softly, "where all stories begin and end." As they approached the tree, its branches lowered, and a voice not spoken but felt filled the air. "You have come far," it said, each word resonating deep within them. "What is it you seek?" Nora's breath caught. She hadn't thought about what she would ask if given the chance, but as the words formed in her heart, she spoke them aloud. "I seek to know where I belong." The tree's light grew brighter, enveloping them in warmth. "You belong to the story," it said, "and the story belongs to you. Carry it forward and let it grow." When Nora and Amara emerged from the portal, the forest felt different. The air was still charged with magic, but it was quieter now, as though the forest were resting after sharing its greatest secret. They returned to the cottage, their packs lighter, but their hearts full. As Nora hung the compass back on the mantel, she knew she had changed. The forest was no longer just a place of solace, it was part of her story, and she was part of its. And in the heart of the woods, the ancient pine swayed gently, its whispers carrying the promise of more stories to come.